Whenever you look up the most popular Chinese dishes around the world, at the top of the list, there's pretty much always some type of sweet and sour, General Tso style, probably deep fried, probably chicken, but today I want to show you a real traditional Chinese sweet and sour sauce for the sophisticated adults like you and me. I am of course talking about the Sichuanese yuxiang flavor, which just so happens to be the perfect companion for pretty much my favorite eggplant dish of all time. The buttery, sweet and sour yuxiang eggplant. This is part 3 in my series on the amazing food of Sichuan, one of the big culinary families of China. This series is sponsored by Ming River Baijiu. Baijiu is China's #1 distilled spirit, and Ming River is the first brand bringing the original Sichuan Baijiu to people outside of China. More on that later, but for now, let's talk about sweet and sour sauce. And first of all, yes, it's true. There's a lot of sweet and sour food in China. There are tons of regional varieties all the way from the north to the south, from the coast into the mainland. But all of these local sweet and sour dishes have at least 2 ingredients in common. 1, there's always some type of sugar, and 2, there's always some type of vinegar, hence sweet and sour. And when you look at it historically, it makes a lot of sense. You see, China has been very early to the global sugar game, starting to cultivate and refine sugarcane over 1,000 years back, which is when Buddhist monks brought the technology over from India, where sugar refining probably originated. But you know what? China has been even earlier to the vinegar game. In fact, vinegar appears quite a number of times in a very well preserved ancient Chinese book called Qimin Yao Shu, which by the way means something like how normal people manage to get by, and this book contains a lot of ancient farming techniques and recipes. Super interesting. And with that deep history, it's not surprising that your Asian grocery store usually holds quite the selection of Chinese vinegars. Whenever you're looking for a mild and neutral variety, go for white rice vinegar. In northern China, that type of vinegar plus some regular white sugar is all you need to make the sweet and sour sauce to the local favorite guo bao rou. And these days, in many parts of China, it's a similar story, maybe with a few small additions. It's an open secret, for example, that the very fancy looking squirrel-shaped fish, don't worry, there's no squirrel in there, is actually made with pretty much the same basic sweet and sour sauce and the addition of ketchup. It's pretty much the same with the ever-popular Cantonese gulao rou, even though that was traditionally made with hawberries, as I learned on Chinese Cooking Demystified. And then this flavor is further enhanced by the addition of pineapple or other exotic fruits. And since a lot of the early Chinese immigrants that ventured into the world came from that region of China, I like to see gulao rou as sort of the granddaddy, or should I say sugar daddy, of all Chinese sweet and sour dishes that kind of helped popularize this flavor profile all over the world. But guys, let's be real. While all of these dishes are pretty delicious, they can also seem a little bit like kids' candy melted over fried chicken. And this is where we get to the food of Sichuan, which also features a number of sweet and sour dishes, but they all seem a little more sophisticated, a little more exquisite. And one of the most famous, authentic examples for this would be any dish that comes from this big family where all dishes start with yuxiang anything. Yuxiang sauce is like this incredible marriage of a sweet and sour sauce, a pretty complex tasting one if I may say, and some spiciness, but not an overwhelming amount. The spiciness comes from a fermented chili and bean paste called doubanjiang, which you should be able to find in most Asian grocery stores. You can also use sambal oelek or even sriracha as a substitute. Another big reason for this nuanced taste of the yuxiang flavor is the vinegar. This is where you can really make use of that huge selection in your Asian grocery store. If you're lucky, you can find a dark vinegar called baoning. This is the original Sichuan stuff. But if I may give you a little piece of advice, with Chinese vinegar, I find that you usually get what you pay for. So I definitely recommend getting the highest end baoning you can find. It's really worth it. The flavor will be super fragrant and complex. But even if you can't find baoning, every Chinese store will have this other vinegar called qingqiang or zhenjiang, and it's a very reasonable substitute. And if you really need an emergency option, just go for balsamic vinegar. It sounds a bit weird, but it kind of works. Both of these 2 special ingredients are fermented and will last a very long time, so it's really worth having them around. Everything else you need for an yuxiang sauce should be pretty easy to find anywhere in the world. And so in the search for a base recipe, I turned to the book when it comes to Sichuan cooking, which is of course Fuchsia Dunlop's the food of Sichuan. I think it's safe to say that Fuchsia Dunlop is the leading English language expert when it comes to this. This book has a few yuxiang recipes, but the one I want to cook with you guys today is this one, yuxiang eggplant, my all-time favorite. And for that, we're gonna need some eggplants. If you can get the purple Asian eggplant, great. If not, just use any other kind. Cut it into batons, then sprinkle with some salt and toss. We do this to soften and dehydrate the eggplant, after which you want to pat it super dry. This step will usually take at least 30 minutes, so just enough time for me to pick up the food of Sichuan, read this amazing book, realize that I have so many more questions. If there was only a way I could speak to the author of this book.
I just felt that Sichuanese food is having a moment now of global recognition, and I wanted to write a book for that, really.
Ladies and gentlemen, the author of this book, the one and only Fuchsia Dunlop, Sichuan food expert.
Well, I think there is this very dominating stereotype that it's all about mala, numbing and hot, lots of chilies and Sichuan pepper. And indeed, that is the stereotype within China as well. But actually, it's much more subtle than that. Local chefs would say that their sort of maxim is 一菜一个白菜白味, which means each dish has its own style and 100 dishes have 100 different flavors. So that's the thing, really, that I think that people just don't recognize this stunning variety and the fact that a good Sichuanese meal is a sort of journey of the palate.
Okay, so while we actually have a bona fide Sichuan food expert on the line, let's reveal the biggest mystery surrounding the yuxiang flavor. Where does that weird name come from? What does yuxiang actually mean? In your book, you translate it as fish fragrant. Can you tell me a little bit about where that name comes from? It's such a mystery to most people that look into this dish.
Yeah, it's very strange. So it's the two characters literally for fish and fragrant, which I think sounds rather exciting and, unusual. But the thing that's really surprising is that there's no fish in it. The flavor profile is pickled chilies, ginger, garlic, spring onion, bit of sugar and vinegar. But what the local explanation for this curious name is that it uses the seasonings for traditional fish cookery. And indeed, it uses the same ingredients that are used to cook fish, particularly in southern Sichuan. There is an alternative explanation, which is that in the past, when people were pickling their long red chilies, Jingtiao, a local variety of chili, they pickle them in brine. And sometimes people would pop a few raw crucian carp fish into the pickle jar to sort of enhance the umami flavor, and as they pickled, the fish would sort of disintegrate and just improve the flavor. One of my friends thinks that there's a tradition in China of sort of literate gentlemen giving poetic names to dishes. So maybe this was a dish that people, a sort of style of flavor that people were already cooking, and then someone one day said, oh, let's call it fish fragrant because it uses the seasonings of fish cookery. But who knows exactly? So
we have an idea of what the yuxiang flavor actually is, and it's great. But listen, when you combine this flavor with an eggplant in the right way, something incredible happens. Yuxiang eggplant, yuxiang qiezi, has this magical ability to become everyone's favorite Chinese dish at some point in time when they get into Chinese cooking and eating. What is your guess? Why is this a dish that you and many, many other people just fall in love with forever?
Well, firstly, it has this amazingly luxurious mouthfeel texture. So you start by deep frying the aubergines, the eggplants, till they're really sort of buttery and golden. So they have that lovely melt in the mouth consistency. And then there is this layering of flavors. So there's a bit of sweetness, which I think most people find appealing, but it's balanced by a sort of spritz of vinegar. So you get the sweet and sour is just one of those flavors that everyone loves. But here it's not a real in-your-face sweet and sour. It's a sort of, it's just one element. And then you have a bit of spiciness, and then all those rich flavors of ginger, garlic, and spring onion sizzled in oil, which create this richness of flavor. And then, of course, it looks beautiful because it has this very sort of appealing, red color from the chili bean sauce or the pickled chilies, which is actually very typical of Sichuanese cooking. And also for me, it's just that dish is a kind of miracle because it's such basic ingredients. I mean, it's just eggplants, aubergines, and it's so delicious. And as you said, everyone loves it. And I've even, I've cooked that dish for Turkish friends, and the Turks are real, aubergine experts, and they think it's like the best aubergine they ever had.
if it passes this test, then it can pass any test.
Yeah.
So Fuchsia is about to drop some more serious wisdom, like what to do if you don't want to deep fry your eggplant, or do you really have to use the long purple Chinese eggplant? But we'll get to all of that after a quick drink, with best regards from this video's sponsor, Ming River Baijiu. Actually, wait, let me just blow your mind for just a second. We used 3 different fermented ingredients for the yuxiang eggplant, right? The chili bean paste, soy sauce, and vinegar. So in case you haven't noticed yet, fermented things are all over Chinese cooking, and they all require one thing, and that's called chu. Chu is basically like a sourdough starter, but for your favorite fermented condiments. But here's the kicker. Chu production originated as part of an ancient winemaking technique. So guess what is also made from chu? Huh? No? No? Yes, it's Ming River Baijiu. I kid you not, chu is what actually turns the grains used for baijiu production into that sweet, sweet alcohol. And because chu is pretty much made from microorganisms that are being harvested from, quite literally, the air around you, it's no surprise that every region's chu will taste differently, and that is what gives Ming River Sichuan Baijiu its unique aroma. Okay, now I definitely need a drink. And to pair with yuxiang eggplant, today we're making a long drink called General Ming. It couldn't be simpler. Equal amounts of Ming River Baijiu and red vermouth. Top up with tonic water, and then just give a lemon rind a little squeeze for that citrus oil. And so, General Ming it is on another early morning drinking session for me. I hope it's okay to drink this with a straw. Listen, if you like gin tonic, you're gonna love this one. This is actually really good. I definitely finished this one right now, but I still have a video to edit. Thank you, Ming River, for sponsoring this series. If you guys are interested in trying the flavor of the original Sichuan Baijiu, Ming River is 100% the way to go, and they're available in the US and Europe. But now back to Fuchsia Dunlop and some expert level yuxiang eggplant cooking tips.
How important is it to use a Chinese eggplant versus a Western eggplant, let's say?
The most beautiful yuxiang qiezi is made with the sort of purple eggplant, and you can see the photograph in my book, which is actually my favorite photo in the book. I managed to get the Chinese purple aubergine, and then it just adds this iridescent purple color, and it's totally beautiful. But actually, flavor-wise, the dish is really about the flavor combination, and I don't think it matters. It's delicious whichever way you do it.
You deep fry it, right? You pass it through oil.
Well, I mean, I think it's worth it, isn't it? So you look at the result.
I mean, when is deep frying not worth it, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people are like, they love eating it, but when it comes to cooking yuxiang qiezi, they're a little bit hesitant because deep frying is always a little bit of a step.
Firstly, I would say that one reason that people don't like deep frying is that you need so much oil. But the way I do this at home is that I actually fry the eggplants in several batches, so I don't use that much oil, and then you can reuse the oil for seasoning the wok or for other things. I have also done it by roasting the eggplants in the oven so that they are golden, a bit caramelized. Problem with that method is that it doesn't fix the shape. So if you then take them out of the oven tray and put them into the sauce, they disintegrate. It'll still taste good, but it'll be more like a mush. And there is another way that I've also done it as a dish served either hot or cold, maybe for a buffet, is that you cook them in a tray in the oven and then make the sauce and pour it all over them. And if I was serving it not hot but cold, then I would not thicken the sauce and maybe use a little less liquid. So I would say that if you really don't want to deep fry, then yes, roast them in the oven, pour the sauce over so they don't disintegrate. But it's just a slightly different sort of dish.
So eggplants are not the only things, right, that are being cooked in the yuxiang flavor. What other options, what other popular options are there in Sichuan?
Well, I mean, the most famous one really is yuxiang rosi, which is like pork slivers. There's a recipe in the book too. Thin slivers of pork with a bit of woody and mushroom, and then either celtus, lettuce stem, or bamboo shoot usually. That is the real classic, actually, more so than the fish fragrant eggplant, which is more like a home style dish. You can do cold fish fragrant dishes. I've got in the book a sauce for cold poached chicken with the fish fragrant sauce, and that's sometimes used for rabbit or for chicken. Fish fragrant seafood. In season, the tender shoots of oilseed rape just for like 1 month in the winter, but they will do in a fish fragrant sauce, which are delicious. Yeah, and then also if you go to a Muslim restaurant, they'll be doing probably lamb or beef in a fish fragrant sauce. So it's really about flavor, and you can do whatever you like. But curiously, the only thing that you never have really is a fish fragrant fish.